The planet was silent except for the faint hum of the wind and the distant sounds of strange creatures moving through the dense jungle. The sky, darkened with thick clouds, made the place feel colder than it was. A spaceship lay crashed at the edge of a dense forest, its metal surface bent and broken in several places, as if it had fallen from a great height. Inside the wreckage, a small alien girl lay curled up on the cold ground. Her clothes were torn and dirtied, her skin bruised and scraped from the rough landing. She was a pale shade of green, her features delicate yet strong. Her silver eyes were closed as if she had lost all hope of ever waking up to see a better world. Her name was Mela, and she had once been part of a thriving, peaceful race. But that peace had been shattered long ago. The people she came from were now enslaved by a brutal empire. Mela had escaped, but in doing so, her ship was damaged, and she had crash-landed on this unknown planet. Alone, broken, and with nothing left to hold on to, Mela had lost all hope. She had nothing. No family. No home. No hope. She was an alien in a strange world, and she had no idea how to survive. It was in the middle of this hopelessness that Jack found her. Jack was part of a human exploration team, sent to explore uncharted planets, searching for any signs of life or resources that could benefit humanity. He had been on this planet for only a few days, scanning for valuable minerals when he picked up a strange signal coming from deep within the jungle. It was weak, barely noticeable, but it was enough to catch his attention. He thought it might be worth investigating. Maybe it was a beacon from another ship or a communication device from another life form. As Jack made his way through the thick foliage, pushing branches and vines out of his way, he had no idea what he would find. He had been on many planets before, seen alien creatures and strange environments, but nothing could have prepared him for what he stumbled upon. When Jack reached the crash site, he paused for a moment, surveying the wreckage. His trained eyes immediately recognized the markings on the ship. It wasn't human. In fact, it wasn't anything he had ever seen before. It was a sleek, advanced design that hinted at a much older, more sophisticated civilization. As he moved closer, he noticed the alien girl lying near the ship, barely moving. She looked fragile. Her skin, though resilient, was marked with signs of extreme exhaustion and pain. She was small, even by alien standards. She had no weapons, no tools, just the clothes on her back. Jack's heart skipped a beat as he crouched down beside her. His first instinct was to reach for his comm device to call for backup, but something held him back. The girl, despite her state, didn't look dangerous. She looked like she was suffering. Jack reached into his bag and pulled out a ration pack, hoping she might be able to eat something. Slowly he leaned forward, speaking softly so as not to startle her. "Hey, are you all right? Can you hear me?" His voice was calm, gentle, but there was a hint of urgency in his tone. He had to help her. For a moment, there was no response. The girl didn't even twitch. Jack's heart sank, and he wondered if he was too late. Maybe she had been here too long. Maybe there was no saving her. But just as he was about to give up and make his way back to the team, the girl stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and Jack could see the pain and confusion in them. She blinked several times as if trying to adjust to the world around her. She slowly lifted her head, but she winced in pain and collapsed back onto the ground. Jack's heart ached at the sight. Hey, take it easy," he said gently, putting his hand on her shoulder. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to help." The alien girl's eyes flicked to his hand and then to his face. She seemed confused, unsure of who he was or what he was doing here. But there was something in her gaze, something that made Jack feel as though she understood him on some level. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, She let out a soft, pained breath and closed her eyes again, as if trying to find the strength to speak. Jack didn't know what to do. She couldn't communicate with him. There was no way for him to know what she needed. He couldn't leave her here, not like this, not alone. So he decided to stay. He carefully helped her sit up, propping her against the wreckage of the ship. He offered her a small packet of food. She looked at it for a moment, then back at him. She had no idea what it was, but she was hungry, and that hunger was stronger than her fear. Slowly, she took the packet, and with shaky hands tore it open. She ate slowly, cautiously, as though unsure whether it was safe. Jack watched her carefully, making sure she didn't choke or hurt herself. He wanted to help her, to make sure she was safe, but he knew he couldn't do it alone. He needed to get her back to the main camp, where the team could assess the situation and figure out what to do next. But something told him that wasn't going to be easy. The girl's presence here, her survival, would be complicated. He wasn't just dealing with an alien now. He was dealing with someone who had lost everything. And yet, in her eyes, Jack could see something else. A spark. A glimmer of hope, no matter how small. He didn't know it then, but that spark would grow into something far stronger than he could imagine. The alien girl wasn't just a survivor. She was a fighter. And Jack would soon learn that she wasn't as helpless as she seemed. As the days passed, Jack remained by Mella's side. They were far from the main human camp, hidden deep in the jungle. The thick trees and dense foliage protected them, but it also made their situation more dangerous. Mella was still weak, but she was no longer as helpless as when Jack first found her. She had started to regain some strength, but there was still a long way to go. Jack had set up a small camp near the wreckage of the ship. His survival skills, learned from years of exploration, helped him build a small shelter to keep them safe from the elements. The food was running low, but Jack was determined to keep Mella fed. She had never seen food like this before, but she ate it gratefully. Each meal, no matter how small, seemed to give her a bit more energy, but she still didn't speak. She seemed to avoid making eye contact, and Jack could tell she was haunted by something. He didn't know if it was her past or the loneliness of being in a strange world. Jack often sat beside her in silence, watching her stare off into the distance. She seemed to be lost in thought, her eyes distant and sad. Sometimes she would look at him, but it was only for a second before she would quickly turn her gaze away. She was still afraid, Jack could see that, but he didn't give up. He kept talking to her, offering small gestures of kindness. He never pushed her to speak or to explain anything before she was ready. He would tell her about Earth, about his life, about the simple things he enjoyed. He told her about the stars, how humans had once looked up at them with fear and wonder, unsure if they were alone in the universe. Now Earth was part of a vast community of races, each with their own stories. Jack shared stories of his travels, of the places he'd seen, and the people he'd met. It was his way of connecting with her, of showing her that there was more to life than the loneliness and despair that she had experienced. One day, as Jack was gathering firewood, he came across something strange. It was a piece of metal, part of a broken weapon. He carefully examined it, realizing it wasn't human. It was alien, much like the ship Mella had arrived in. He took it back to camp, where Mella was sitting by the fire. She looked up at him as he approached, her eyes wide with curiosity. Jack didn't say anything at first. He just handed her the Yido metal piece, watching her closely. Mella took it in her hands, feeling its cold surface. She didn't speak, but Jack could see the recognition in her eyes. She knew what it was. Slowly, she began to examine the piece more closely, turning it over in her hands, studying its design. Her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and fear. It was clear that the weapon held memories for her memories. She wasn't ready to share. Jack could feel the tension in the air. He didn't want to push her, but he needed answers. He needed to understand why she was so afraid, why she was so distant. He knelt beside her, his voice gentle as he spoke. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to," Jack said softly. "But if you ever feel like telling me, I'm here to listen." Mela didn't respond. She just continued to stare at the piece of metal, her fingers tracing the edges. After a long silence, she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "They took everything from me," she said, her voice trembling. "My family, my freedom. They took it all. And now ... now I'm alone." Jack's heart ached as he heard her words. He had known that something terrible had happened to her, but hearing it out loud made it more real. She wasn't just a survivor. She had been part of something larger, something beautiful, and it had been destroyed. He didn't know how to fix that, but he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't leave her like this. "Whatever happened to you, it's not your fault," Jack said softly. "You're not alone anymore. I'm here, and I'll help you." Mela's eyes glistened, but she quickly wiped away the tears that had started to form. She wasn't used to showing vulnerability. She had spent so long fighting for her survival that it felt unnatural to let someone else in. But there was something about Jack, his kindness, his patience, made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt in years. For the first time since Jack had found her, she gave him a small, tentative smile. It was brief, but it was enough. It was a sign of trust. She was starting to open up to him. That night, as they sat by the fire, Jack shared more stories. He told her about the different cultures on Earth, the beauty of the oceans, and the forests that stretched for miles. Mela listened intently, her eyes brightening with each new story. Jack didn't expect her to say anything in return, but he could see that his words were slowly building something inside her. Maybe, just maybe, she could start to believe that there was hope again. But as the days went on, the reality of their situation started to set in. Jack knew they couldn't stay in the jungle forever. The rescue team would eventually come looking for him, but they wouldn't know where to find him. They couldn't stay hidden forever. Jack decided it was time to take Mela back to the main camp where he could get help. But when he spoke about it, Mela tensed. She didn't want to leave. She was afraid. Afraid of what might happen if they were found. Jack could see the fear in her eyes, and he understood. The universe was not kind to those who had no power. And Mela had learned that the hard way. "I won't let anything happen to you," Jack said, his voice firm but reassuring. "I'll protect you. We'll figure this out together." Mela hesitated, but eventually, she nodded. She wasn't ready to trust the humans completely, but she trusted Jack. And for now, that was enough. The next day, they set out, moving quickly through the jungle. Jack led the way, keeping a close eye on the path ahead. He knew that if they were going to make it back to the camp, they had to be careful. The last thing they needed was to run into trouble. As they walked, Mela stayed close to Jack, her hand resting lightly on his arm. She wasn't used to relying on anyone, but with Jack, it felt different. She had never felt this kind of safety before. It was something new. And maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of a new chapter in her life. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the jungle floor. The air was thick with the sounds of distant animals, and the temperature was slowly dropping. As night began to settle in, Jack and Mela had been traveling for hours, making their way through the thick undergrowth. It was clear that the journey back to the main camp was going to be more difficult than Jack had first thought. They had no map, no clear path to follow, and the dense jungle made it easy to get lost. Mela was walking more easily now, her body growing stronger with each step. She still wasn't fully recovered, but the food and rest Jack had given her had helped. She wasn't as weak as she had been when Jack first found her, but the trauma of her past still haunted her. Every so often, Jack would catch her looking over her shoulder, as though she feared someone was following them. He understood. The empire she had fled from wasn't likely to give up their search for her easily, but Jack wasn't going to let anything happen to her. He had made that promise, and he intended to keep it. He could see the fear in her eyes, but he also saw something else, a spark of determination. Mela wasn't the helpless alien girl she had been when Jack first found her. She was starting to regain her confidence, step by step. They came to a small clearing where the trees thinned out, giving them a moment of respite. Jack stopped for a moment to rest, wiping the sweat from his brow. The heat and humidity were unbearable, but there was no time to waste. He needed to keep moving, to get Mela to safety. "We'll rest here for a bit," Jack said, setting down his pack and sitting on a large rock. "You okay?" Mela nodded, though she still seemed distant. She sat down beside him, but didn't say anything. Jack could tell she was deep in thought. He wondered if she was thinking about the life she had left behind, or about what she had been through. He didn't know much about her past, but he could sense that it was something terrible. "Hey," Jack said, trying to get her attention. "You're not alone in this anymore, all right?" Mela looked at him, her silver eyes meeting his for the first time in a long while. There was something in those eyes, something soft and vulnerable. For the first time, Jack saw a glimpse of the girl she had been before everything went wrong. It was a side of her she had hidden away. A side that perhaps she was starting to let out. Mela hesitated for a moment, then spoke. "I was part of something. Something good. Before all this happened, we had a home, a family. We had peace." Jack listened carefully. He didn't want to push her, but he needed to understand what had happened. "What happened to your people?" Mela's voice trembled as she spoke. "The Empire came. They conquered us, took our home. We fought back, but we were outnumbered. We lost everything." She paused for a long moment, staring at the ground. "I was supposed to be part of the resistance. I was supposed to help free us, but I couldn't. I failed." Jack didn't know what to say. He could see the pain in her eyes, the guilt that weighed on her. He couldn't imagine what it must have been like to lose everything, to watch your people be destroyed. But he knew one thing for sure: Mela was not a failure. She had survived when so many others hadn't. That took strength. "You didn't fail," Jack said, his voice steady. "You're still here. You survived. That's more than most could do." Mela looked at him, her expression softening. For the first time, she seemed to believe what he was saying. "Thank you," she whispered. Jack nodded, smiling at her. He knew there was still a long way to go, that there were many obstacles ahead, but this small moment of connection made him believe that maybe, just maybe, they could make it through this together. After a short rest, they continued on their journey. The dense jungle was beginning to feel more like a maze than a path. Jack kept his eyes open, scanning the area for any signs of danger. Mela walked beside him, her pace quickening as she grew stronger. But as they pressed on, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He couldn't see anything out of the ordinary, but his instincts told him they were being watched. He glanced over at Mela, but she didn't seem to notice. She was too focused on the path ahead. They had been walking for what felt like hours, when they suddenly heard a rustling in the bushes. Jack stopped in his tracks, his body going tense. He reached for his blaster, his hand trembling slightly. Mela froze as well, her eyes wide with fear. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know," Jack said. his eyes scanning the shadows. "Stay close." Another rustling noise, this time louder. Then, out of the bushes, two figures emerged. Jack's heart skipped a beat. They were alien soldiers, humanoid figures in dark armor, their weapons raised and aimed directly at them. Mela gasped, her face going pale. "Run!" Jack shouted, grabbing Mela's hand and pulling her into the dense trees. They didn't have time to think. They just ran. Jack pushed through the thick brush, moving as quickly as he could. Behind him, he could hear the soldiers chasing them, their heavy boots crashing through the underbrush. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he dragged Mela along. He had to get them out of there. There was no way he could fight them all. He needed to find cover. Up ahead, Jack spotted a small cave hidden beneath the roots of a large tree. Without thinking, he pulled Mela toward it, urging her to go inside. They crawled into the dark cave, breathing heavily, trying to stay as quiet as possible. They lay there, trembling, listening as the soldiers passed by. Jack held his breath, praying they wouldn't find them. The soldiers' footsteps grew fainter, and slowly, the jungle returned to its usual sounds. After what felt like hours, Jack let out a sigh of relief. They had escaped this time. But Jack knew they couldn't hide forever. They needed to move quickly. "We'll keep moving at first light," Jack whispered to Mela, who was huddled close to him. "We'll be okay. Just stay with me." Mela nodded, but Jack could see the fear in her eyes. He knew she wasn't sure they would make it, but he wasn't going to give up. Not now, not ever. The next morning, the jungle felt quieter than usual. Jack and Mela had spent a restless night in the cave, only a few hours of sleep between them. Jack kept his eyes on the path ahead, knowing that they couldn't stay hidden for much longer. The alien soldiers would be looking for them, and it was only a matter of time before they found out they were still alive. Jack's mind raced as they moved through the jungle, the weight of their situation pressing down on him. He knew that his options were running out. They couldn't keep running forever, and they couldn't keep hiding. The soldiers would never stop hunting them unless they found a way to fight back. But Jack didn't have the resources to take on an entire squad of armed aliens. "Jack," Mela said softly, breaking the silence. "What are we going to do? They'll never stop looking for us." Her voice was filled with fear, and Jack could hear the uncertainty in her words. He knew she was scared. She had every right to be. They were outnumbered, and they had no way of knowing how many soldiers were out there. But Jack couldn't afford to show weakness. He had to stay strong for both of them. "We'll figure something out," Jack said, his voice steady. "I'm not going to let them hurt you." Mela didn't say anything, but Jack could see the faintest glimmer of hope in her eyes. She was starting to believe in him, starting to trust that he would keep his promise to protect her. It wasn't much, but it was something. They kept moving, pushing through the thick jungle. The sun was high in the sky now, and the heat was unbearable. Sweat dripped from Jack's forehead as he wiped it away with the back of his hand. Mela was. "If they want her, they'll have to go through us." Jack appreciated the commander's resolve, but deep down, he knew the situation was more complicated than that. They didn't have the resources to take on a full assault from the Empire. They would need a plan to get Mela out safely before things escalated. Jack returned to the tent where Mela was resting. She was sitting on a cot, staring out of the entrance, lost in thought. When she saw him, she gave him a small, tired smile. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything," Jack smiled back. "You don't have to thank me. You're safe. Now we'll figure out the rest together." But even as he spoke, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that their troubles were far from over. The soldiers were out there, and they wouldn't stop until they found her. But Jack was ready to do whatever it took to protect Mela. For the first time, she had hope. and Jack was determined to make sure it wasn't taken away. Still walking beside him, but her steps were slower now. She was still recovering from the crash, and the journey was taking a toll on her. "We need to find water," Jack said, glancing at Mela. "We won't make it much longer without it." Mela nodded, but she didn't say anything. She didn't have the energy to argue. Jack knew she was exhausted, and he could feel his own strength waning. But they couldn't stop now. Not when they were so close to the main camp. They continued their trek, searching for any sign of water. It wasn't long before they came across a small stream, its clear waters flowing gently through the jungle. Jack knelt down, cupping his hands to drink, and Mela followed his lead. They both drank deeply, savoring the cool relief it gave them. Jack looked up from the stream, his gaze scanning the surroundings. There was a thick underbrush on either side, but beyond that, he could make out a faint trail leading through the trees. It was faint, but it was enough for Jack to know that they were close to something. He turned to Mela, who had finished drinking and was now standing beside him, her face tense with worry. "We need to keep moving," Jack said. "That trail could lead us to the camp." Mela nodded again, but Jack could see the fear in her eyes. She wasn't sure if she could trust the path ahead, but Jack was determined to push forward. He had promised her that they would be safe, and he wasn't about to break that promise now. They set off again, following the trail through the jungle. It was slow going, but they managed to make good progress. After what felt like hours, they began to see signs of civilization. The trail widened, and Jack could see the faint outline of buildings in the distance. His heart raced with hope. They were almost there. Suddenly, a loud noise shattered the stillness of the jungle. Jack froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He recognized the sound immediately, the sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, crunching through the underbrush. "We're not alone," Jack whispered, his voice tense. "Get down." He pulled Mela to the ground behind a thick tree, trying to make themselves as small as possible. Jack's hand tightened around his blaster, his fingers itching to draw it, but he knew they couldn't afford to fight. Not with the soldiers so close. Mela looked at him, her eyes wide with panic. Jack motioned for her to stay quiet, and she nodded, her breathing shallow. They waited in silence, the sound of the approaching footsteps growing louder. Jack's mind raced. There was no way they could outrun them now. The soldiers were too close. If they stayed hidden, they might be able to avoid detection, but there was no guarantee. The only option was to fight. But Jack knew that they couldn't fight them all. They needed a plan. Just as Jack was about to make a decision, the soldiers appeared. There were 3 of them, dressed in dark armor and carrying weapons that Jack recognized from their previous encounters. The soldiers walked past, not noticing Jack and Mela hidden in the brush. Jack held his breath, watching as the soldiers moved further down the trail. His heart was pounding in his chest, and he felt Mela's grip tighten on his arm. The danger was real, and they were running out of time. The soldiers had passed, but Jack knew they had to move quickly before the next group arrived. "We need to move," Jack said quietly. Now, he stood up, pulling Mela with him, and they began to move down the trail, their footsteps light and quick. They had to get out of there. They had to get to the camp before the soldiers returned. As they made their way through the jungle, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were being hunted. It was only a matter of time before the soldiers found them again. But this time, Jack wasn't going to let them take Mela. This time he would fight. He would do whatever it took to keep her safe. They reached the edge of the jungle, and there, in the distance, Jack saw the faint outline of the camp. It was small, hidden from view by the trees, but it was exactly what they needed. Jack's heart lifted with relief. "We made it," he whispered, his voice full of emotion. Mela looked at him, her face full of disbelief, for the first time. In what felt like forever, she smiled. "We're not out of danger yet," Jack said. But he couldn't hide the pride in his voice. "But we will be soon. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments or additions." "You said, Part 5 1,000 words Kaleko or interest in Hunachea or third-person style. Ma Lakaniha or simple basic English could use Karna high dot or underline ChatGPT said. Here's Part 5 of the story. Written in third-person style, using 1,000 words. Simple basic English, and without dots or underlines. The camp was quieter than Jack expected. As he and Mela approached, he could see the outlines of tents and makeshift structures through the trees. The air was thick with tension, but there was a sense of calm as well. It was the kind of calm that only came when danger was nearby, yet everyone remained on edge, waiting for the worst. Jack didn't waste any time. He moved quickly toward the camp, guiding Mela by the arm. Her hand tightened on his, and he could feel her nervousness. He knew she was scared of what might happen once they entered the camp, but he couldn't let that stop them. He made a mental note of the layout. There were guards posted at each entrance, and Jack knew they would have to be careful. He couldn't afford to alert anyone to Mela's presence just yet. Not until he had a chance to explain everything. As they reached the outer edge of the camp, Jack stopped and turned to Mela. He could see the fear in her eyes, but there was also something else there, a glimmer of hope. She was beginning to believe that she might finally have a chance at a normal life again. "Stay close to me," Jack whispered. "I'm going to talk to the commander. You'll be safe here." Mela nodded, but she didn't speak. She was still too afraid to trust anyone fully, even Jack. She had been betrayed so many times by her own people. The soldiers who had once been her captors were now the ones who hunted her. The memories of her past were still too fresh. Jack knew it would take time, but he hoped that this new life would help heal the wounds. Jack walked into the camp, his hand resting on his blaster. Just in case. He approached the commander's tent, where a tall man with a strong build was standing guard. The commander looked up as Jack approached. "Who are you?" the commander asked, eyeing Jack warily. "I'm Jack, part of the reconnaissance team. I found something." "Someone," Jack said, his voice calm but serious. "I need to speak with the commander. It's important." The commander frowned but nodded, stepping aside to let Jack pass. Jack entered the tent, where the commander was, sitting behind a table filled with maps and documents. He looked up as Jack entered. "What is it, Jack?" the commander asked. "I found an alien," Jack said, his voice steady. "A girl. She's the last of her kind, and she needs protection. The soldiers who chased her will be looking for her, and I'm asking for your help." The commander raised an eyebrow. "An alien girl? You're asking me to protect her?" "Yes," Jack said, standing tall. "She's been through hell. She doesn't trust anyone. But I know that if we don't help her, she'll never be safe. And if the soldiers find her, they'll kill her." The commander didn't say anything for a moment, studying Jack carefully. Then, he nodded slowly. "I'll give her shelter," the commander said. "But you better be sure about this, Jack. The last thing we need is trouble with the Empire." Jack nodded. He had no doubts. He had seen the fear in Mela's eyes, and he knew that he couldn't turn his back on her now. "I'm sure." The commander stood and moved toward a door at the back of the tent. "I'll make sure the girl is safe. Take her to one of the secure tents. I'll send a medic to check on her." Jack didn't waste any time. He quickly turned and made his way back to where Mela was waiting. She was standing by a tree, her eyes scanning the camp nervously. When she saw Jack approaching, she stepped forward, looking uncertain. "Are we safe here?" she asked softly. Jack smiled and nodded. "Yes, we're safe." The commander agreed to help. You're going to be all right now. Mela hesitated, but then she let out a small breath and allowed herself to relax. Jack could see the relief in her eyes, though it was still tempered by fear. He knew it wasn't over yet, but for the first time, Mela seemed to believe that. Things could get better. Jack led Mela to one of the tents, where a medic was waiting. The medic checked Mela over, noting the bruises and cuts on her body, but nothing seemed life-threatening. Mela winced slightly as the medic cleaned some of the wounds, but she didn't say anything. Jack stayed by her side, offering quiet reassurance. Once the medic was finished, Jack stepped outside, leaving Mela to rest. He needed to talk to the commander about their next move. The soldiers who had been hunting Mela would be searching for her, and Jack knew they couldn't stay here forever. They had to figure out a plan to make sure Mela was safe for good. He entered the commander's tent again, this time with more urgency in his voice. What's the plan? The soldiers will be here soon. We need to move quickly. The commander stood at the table, his face serious. We'll move her to a secure location. There's an old base a few miles from here. It's off the radar. No one will find her there. Jack nodded, but his mind was already working. He wasn't sure if moving Mela would be enough. The soldiers were relentless, and if they were determined enough, they could track her down no matter where they went. We'll need to be ready, Jack said. They might come for us, and if they do, we need to be prepared to fight. The commander agreed. We'll arm the camp and set up